What's going on, guys? RDAP Dan, Federal Prison Time Consulting, People Helping People, Communities Method. So I have some unfortunate news for all of you fine folks out there. Kimberly Mason, who is supposed to be our guest, just informed me a few minutes ago that her and her family came down with food poisoning and she's not able to make it. But we will have her back on next week when I get back from New York. However, I do have a special guest today. Many of you follow his channel, his TikTok. He's on Federal Prison Tips, and he's been on TV. He went from master manipulator to kind of helping the world here. So we've got Kyle Sandler joining us today. Kyle, how are you, brother?
Hey, man. Good to see you, man. Thank you for having me on the show, RDAP Dan.
Yeah. Last minute. I appreciate you doing the pop in here. Kyle and I actually had our first conversation about 20 minutes ago.
Yep. It was a long one. I mean, I think we talked for about an hour, but it was good to get to know you, man.
Yeah. You know, it's, I think we talked about maybe doing some future stuff together because we both kind of have that kind of energy where we just like to kind of go. But Kyle, for people that don't know who you are, and we'll probably do a more formal interview with Kyle when I get back, but briefly, who were you? Who are you? And we're still going to talk about women today because this video is really kind of designed for women getting ready to go in. But enlighten us who you are a little bit. Share some of your story.
My name's Kyle Sandler. Most people know me as Federal Prison Tips on TikTok and Instagram. We do about 5 to 7 million views per month across both platforms. We have a federal prison consultancy as well at federalprisontips.com. I spent 6.5 years in federal prison. I started at a minimum camp, worked on my way all the way up to a medium and then back down to a low. I was the 8th man out on the First Step Act, and I went to federal prison for a multi-million-dollar fraud in Opelika, Alabama that was chronicled on an HBO special called Generation Hustle, episode number 9, and then a Hulu special called Scam Goddess, episode number 3. And after coming out of federal prison in 24, I now employ 11 former federal felons full-time across the country, about 6 of them here in Florida, and then the rest of them work remotely. And we do the consulting thing, help people through federal prison. Most of the people that actually work for me are women, so we can kind of sort of talk about women. So I mean, I have a bunch of women that work and help consult people as well.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because so I'm a part of a lot of the different Facebook groups like Alderson and Club Fed, and people in these other groups kept talking about, you know, because obviously, you know, prison.com, there's always some new rules, some bill that just passed, and usually it's not true, or it hasn't passed, but it's just been kind of introduced. So a lot of people are like, yeah, I just read this on federalprisontips.com. I'm like, all right, who's this Jamoke? We got to go find out who we got. We got somebody out here running around posting crazy information. So I went over and checked out his Facebook group, and I was like, wow, okay, a lot of this info that they're posting is substantiated. It's backed up. We do our research to make sure. And I reach out to the guy on Facebook originally. So I decided to Google him. So I Googled his name, and then all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, oh my God, I saw this documentary on HBO a couple of years ago. This guy was like at least the way they painted the picture there, he kind of conned a whole town into out of money. And he shared a little bit of that story. So it's a pretty wild story how he got to where he was going. When I get back from New York, Kyle and I are going to sit down and do an actual interview about his story and how he got to where he was, maybe what his upbringing was like, what his prison journey was like. But today we're talking about women, and Kyle and I were talking a little earlier. You know, if you're a woman going to prison versus a man, there are a lot of similarities as far as like the fear and the anxiety, but there's also a lot of differences, you know, different types of fears, different types of anxieties, and also different types of classification and how they get designated. Kyle, share a little bit about what you're sharing with me. So women that are watching this right now that are kind of freaking out, what are some words of advice or some ideas of things they could be doing right now to prepare properly?
So we kind of touched on this when we were on the phone, when I actually thought you were leaving our telephone conversation to do this interview with another woman, but I'm openly gay, and going into federal prison as an openly gay man, I was scared for my life because you see all these stories about, you know, being like, you know, Bubba's boyfriend and all this kind of stuff and what it was going to be like, but it wasn't like that. There's a lot of hype about prison, and then when you get there, it's not like that. One thing that people have to understand, and you know, I know, I guess we're talking to people that are going to federal prison and state prison, but if you're going to federal prison, it's different than state prison, and it's a different caliber, if you will, of criminal. And there's just certain ways that things are done. Now we have at Federal Prison Tips, our consultancy, we have like 591 clients right now, and more than half of them are women. And you know, they do tend to have, they tend to get a little bit more lenient sentencing before the judge. And then when they get there, you know, yeah, when you get to the higher level women's prisons like Hazleton, you know, you might see some of that gang stuff. But at the lower level prisons like Alderson and Bryan and Tallahassee, you're not going to have to join a gang, and you're not going to have to give up your food to somebody else. And I mean, Orange is the New Black is, some of it is right, but you know, it's not as sensational as you would think it was.
I felt like season one of Orange the New Black was somewhat accurate, and then it
Yeah,
kind of, went off into Hollywood.
but I mean, you know, when you were talking about a lot of your prison experience was akin to high school, and you know, you weren't even a camper, you were at a low, but you know, that's how it is. A lot of it, you know, it's the same school type clique mentality, clique politics. And if you're not, you know, a complete jerk, you're not going to be treated like a complete jerk when you're in prison, whether you're a man or a woman. Now, the women's prisons, like I said, women tend to get a little bit lower on the sentencing side, and then you know, they're not, you don't have to like join a women's gang and then shank somebody the minute that you get to women's prison to to get commissary. You know, I'm hearing from a lot of our self-reporting women that they're getting to the Aldersons, they're getting to they're getting to Bryan, they're getting to Lexington, and other ladies are, you know, giving them shower shoes and giving them deodorant and sports bras when they can't go to the commissary right away. They're making sure that they have extra food in their locker. You know, I'm actually, you know, we kind of joked about some consultants and saying some consultants saying they know them when they don't. Hold
Oh, you mean
on.
consultants knowing
I
some of these famous people that have done time?
Right, but I actually know the Chrisleys. I've talked to both of them, and Julie
We
said, you know,
received
that
a phone call from a reporter that was doing stories on them. I guess there was some, right before he got out, they were trying to do something to get him out because of the way the prison was treating him. But when it got passed down to me from the reporter, I said, nobody's gonna have sympathy for this. He's in prison. He's not being mistreated. He's just being treated like a prisoner.
and not only
And
that,
that's
he
the
was at
thing,
Pensacola, man. I mean,
right?
you can only tell me so much bad stuff about Pensacola, period.
Oh, the movie theater, all the, because I was at Coleman, which isn't too far from Pensacola. And when I was at Coleman, the camp was for women still. So when guys would violate for like cell phones at Pensacola, they'd get pumped up to Coleman,
Coleman Love.
and they would tell me what it was like at Pensacola. And I was like, man, and my time at Coleman wasn't bad, but they made it sound like it was a really sweet ride.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Pensacola, right now they don't, because Pensacola is getting ready to close at the end of the month. But
Right.
prior to this, Pensacola had a job detail that went and picked up trash on the beach. Come on, how bad can it be? And that's facts. That's not some BOP, that's not some inmate.com. I know people for a fact that their job at Pensacola prison was to go pick up trash at the beach.
Yeah. That,
So, like, I
if
mean, how bad is it? And I was at
so
Montgomery camp, I was at Montgomery camp for 3 years before I got caught with the cell phone, and you know, it was camp. And you know, at the women's prison, you know, I have, excuse me, I have a lot of clients who are at Bryan, and I'm sure you have a lot of clients at Bryan as well. They're treated with a certain level of respectability as long as you're respectable, and
you
that's the
kind of
key to it.
And kind of talking about that. So we'll talk a little bit about, because obviously, not being a woman, we do take a lot of women phone calls. And, I've had the experience now of doing this since the end of 2016, to seeing the women that I've dealt with, prior to going in, while they're in, and then seeing their mindset when they come out. Women that are getting ready to go in, Kyle, versus men that are getting ready to go in of similar types of crimes. What would you say some of women's biggest concerns are? And once they get to prison, if there are any issues that they run into, not so much logistic like with classification, but I'm talking about, inmate altercations or whatever. Usually, what types of problems do you see people running into, and what are some of their early on concerns? I'm curious if it's kind of similar to the experience that I've had.
It seems, and it's just logical. I think for most of my women clients, their biggest issue is the kids. What am I going to tell the kids? What am I going to tell the kids when the phone call says mommy's calling from prison? And am I going to be able to talk to the kids? Yeah, if you budget. So in federal prison, let me tell you, and it was the same way for you. So I went in federal prison in 2018 and came out in 2024. In 2020, during CARES Act, during COVID, they started giving away free phone calls. That was something for COVID. They're back to charging for the phone again. And now you can earn some free phone calls for programming. But my point of this all is that since 1993, the federal system has been relegated to no more than 300 and now 500 minutes per month. You have to make those minutes last. And if you have kids, that's very, very important. So when you screw off in prison, you got to remember it's there about teaching you, teaching you to, to untangle your entitlement and to learn to follow the rules, and that, you have to be accountable to somebody. And if you can't do that, then the first thing they seem to go for in the women's prisons is the phone. And that is terrible for these women, these mothers, because now they can't talk to their kids. So like my biggest advice always when I'm talking to women on the front end, especially women with children, is you need to make sure you keep yourself in check and realize that check in prison is different than check on the street. It's going to be
Absolutely.
yes sir, yes ma'am, yeah, I'll clean my room, yeah, I'll do whatever it is, because you are fighting to make sure that you can get that 10-minute phone call at the end of the day to find out how the spelling test went. That's really important. And people don't realize it till you're sitting in a unit disciplinary committee meeting or a DHO meeting, and they're like, oh, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, no phone. And now you have to write your kids a letter. And trust me, kids don't write letters anymore.
And piggybacking on that, it's also, I don't know if you experienced this because you were using a cell phone, but
Right.
if you get put into a cubicle, or if you're in a dorm area and your cellie or your bunkie or your Q partner, if they're using a cell phone and a shakedown happens and that phone gets thrown on the floor and they're not willing to take responsibility for it, and you're not willing to point the finger at them, pretty much everybody in that cube is going to take a shot, right?
Yeah, you're all going.
So,
But also, Dan, and you've probably heard this too, the cell phones are not nearly as prevalent in the women's prisons as the men's prisons.
right. They're not. I tell men that I'm working with, because part of this, especially a lot of the men are trying to get into RDAP, where part of the whole RDAP process and model is holding each other accountable, giving and receiving feedback. So you have to be able to, if you plan to get out in the free world and do the things that you've never done before, prison is kind of your test ground. So if you're not used to telling your friends, I can't be around you if you're using drugs, you're carrying guns or running dope. If you're not comfortable doing that, prison is a perfect place to do that. So, and by the way, your camera just went off, Kyle. I don't know if you can still hear me. Kyle will be back in a minute here. Just let you guys see my pretty face until Kyle comes back on. I tell everybody that I'm working, whether you're a client or not, if you're going into prison and you know that your cellie or your Q partner or whatever is potentially using cell phones, you should have the spine and the wherewithal of keeping your family at the forefront of your mind, reminding them that if you get caught with a cell phone, I'm not taking the rap for you. So either go ask to be moved to another bunk area, to another cell, to another unit, to where you're not going to be around that, because I see people get hit all the times with cell phones. I don't know what happened to Kyle. We lost him here. Let's see if he's texting me. Kyle, you there? We lost you, Kyle. Well, if he comes back on, we'll chat with him some more. But we're going to be doing a much more in-depth interview with Kyle about his experience, and kind of, he just got out last year, and the guy's already rocking and rolling. So he's got a fun story. The guy's increasingly charismatic. And when I say increasingly, it seems like every time I see something with him, he just improves and improves on what he's talking about. I've enjoyed his content. He's got the Facebook page, Federal Prison Tips, which you guys should definitely go check out. There's a lot of great information on there. There he is. Kyle's back. Look who's back.
I took like a phone call came in. I thought I was on Do Not Disturb. My apologies.
No problem. I was like, maybe Kyle doesn't think we have enough viewers for him. He's
You definitely have enough viewers, man. It's funny because you've been doing this a long time, and I kind of like I was saying, I kind of stayed quiet while we were building the the Instagram and the TikTok following up, and then like we came back on Facebook out of nowhere, but we had already started dominating on Instagram and Facebook, and you've had a great big presence on YouTube for a really long time. So I'm kind of honored to be here myself, and kind of cool that we gel so well. Like we have very similar stories. You're from I'm in Fort Lauderdale. You're from Fort Lauderdale, or from South Florida. So you know the area I'm in.
Yeah. Great place. Definitely, and actually we were just talking, you're going to be going to, where was it? You're going?
Well, I'm speaking at the United States Sentencing Commission conference next on the 18th in Salt Lake City.
Of September.
Of August.
So this month. Oh, so just in a couple of weeks. Oh, perfect timing, right when I get back from New York. So yeah, he's planning on maybe making a pit stop here in Idaho, and we'll bring him over. I'm in my house now. Whenever I do,
I've never been to Idaho. So me and Nelson were talking about it. So I was like, yeah, let's go to Idaho. It's cool.
It's not what you would think. It's not just a bunch of potatoes and cornfields, man. It's Kardashian's got a house up here. There's a lot of it's a very, very like Hayden and Coeur d'Alene. They're extremely wealthy areas, but it's a slower lifestyle. So it's a great, how old are you, Kyle?
I'll be fit. I don't look it, but I'll be 50 in November.
Oh, November what?
24th.
Oh, I'm November 27.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So we're both Thanksgiving babies. But
I'll be 48. What am I? 40. I'll be 47. I keep forgetting how old I am at this point.
Yeah. I was born in 75. I'll be 50 in November. But yeah, we've I killed my probation. I killed my paper on my revocation, and you can't keep me like grounded. I go all over the place.
Some guys they're like probation is kind of a trap door for a lot. For me, not so much. Like I smoked weed one time I never got drug tested. I smoked weed one time in the the night before, and then like 8 o'clock that morning, probation called me and said, hey, we need you to come in sometime for a drug test. Tell you the anxiety that went through me, I went and got one of those teas. I'm drinking tons and tons of water, just panic attack all day long. And I ended up passing the test because I hadn't really smoked a lot before that. But for people that are going on to like supervised release, or if they're getting sentenced to probation, don't get complacent. You go a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, and you think, they're never going to do it. It only takes that one time. But yeah, we were kind of talking about, your Facebook page. There's a lot of prison related social media pages for information. The problem is, what I found, a lot of them, they kind of cater towards the negativity. It's just a bunch of chatter on, do you know when this prison's off lockdown? I can't get a hold of my loved one. This isn't fair. It's mistreating. Which, we can all sit here all day long and tell horror stories about what the BOP is doing wrong.
Let me tell you about that for a second. the way that federal prison tips started is I applied to 367 jobs and didn't get one. And then I just lucked into a TikTok video on April 24th of 24, or April 25th of 24, that did 10,000 views, like out of the blue. It was just, my little prison story TikTok thing. And I started doing something that nobody else was doing, which was answering questions about prison that I would just ask myself. Because I ran, you watched my movie, I ran for 18 months. So because I ran for 18 months, I'm black boxed anytime I have to be in transit. And I was locked up from the time they arrested me until the time I was released. I didn't get bond. Bond wasn't even a thing for me. And when you're in the county jail, you ask somebody a question about federal prison, you could be with 15 different inmates that have been to federal prison and get 15 different answers. So I wanted to give the answers based on my experience and based on the truth. And I just found out that the content was somehow resonating with somebody. And I just kept getting more and more and more and more views to the point where, I started taking some consulting calls and going back into doing some jailhouse lawyering from the street. And then I found out how to make sure I was doing it legally. And we started winning motions, and it just kind of evolved into what it's become today, which is employing 11 people full time that all have been to federal prison. And so I decided, I built the platform on literally what it's called, Federal Prison Tips. Well, when I started getting that big platform about, a year ago or 8 months ago, I did start doing some stories on, like, this is going on at Montgomery and this is going on at Beaumont and this is going on at Yazoo. And then I realized that two things. Number one, I could make a whole channel on this, and while it's cool and everything and people need to tell those stories, there are already people out there that are fighting for that cause, and it was derailing me. And then, I started getting calls. Like I've taken calls on the phone from Brian Keller, who used to be a Southeast Regional Director, and Judy Garrett, who used to be the Deputy Director of the BOP. And now I'm getting phone calls from Rick Stover, who's currently the Deputy Director of the BOP. And because I have a voice. I have a voice that nobody's ever had before in the federal prison space, and I'm a trusted authority on it. So I have to, number one, be correct 100% with the content, whether it's going to piss the inmates off or whether it's going to piss the BOP off. It's got to be the truth. And I have a responsibility now to the people that are going through prison and in prison, and even, the decent, the decent people in the prison system that are guards and COs and case managers that actually want to make a career helping people, that, telling that, being honest about it, even when it's not good, is better than, railing on one side or the other. And now that we're back to doing just tips all the time, we're back to getting the exact same views that we got. And there are people out there that, like the Loved Ones Coalition and the First Network, whose goal and purpose is to make sure that the Senate Oversight Committee and the OIG's office hear about what's going on in federal prison, because they need to know. It's the United States of America. But for us, I want to educate people on how to best do their time, serve their time, and then get out in this quick amount of time as possible under the law, and then not have to go back.
When you said you're speaking at the sentencing committee, what are you going to be talking on specifically?
I'm hoping that I can do some testimony on the career offender amendment that didn't make it this year, that they're trying to put again for 2026.
And for women that are getting out of prison, what do you think and again, we're talking about people that have never really been before, so they have their own, down the rabbit hole version. When they think they're not going to be able to get a job, they're not going to be able to get into a relationship, that their life is over, how many women, I know haven't been consulting that long, but I'm sure you have met a lot of people in the industry that have gone to prison, come home from prison. How many of these women that are dedicated, that are willing to put in the work, how many of them have been able to make a life for themselves after the fact?
I mean, you got to be honest and relentless about what you're trying to do. And there are places out there that will, hire you to do a traditional job. But, you also have to remember that if you've got used to living a lifestyle under fraudulent circumstances, a fake lifestyle, that lifestyle was fake, that you're not going to, if you had $10,000 every night to blow, but it was ill-gotten gains and not legal money, the only, you're going to have to succumb to what you're actually capable of doing. But there are places out there where you can, you know, get a new career, get a new lease on life. There's a lot, there's a lot of realtors out there that have felony records that I know of. You know, there's a lot of people in sales that have been to federal prison. Let's just put it
Yeah.
that way. And
Especially Florida, you know, I grew
I'm
up
in
with,
Florida.
I
Like
know it's in
I
Florida, like from Delray Beach through or actually Boynton Beach through like Boca right into Fort Lauderdale, down Federal Dixie Highway. We used to call that Maggot Mile because that's where every, chop call center would open up, loan mod, student
oh yeah.
loans. Yeah. So it's certain areas breed different styles, but I also see a lot of people that go into prison that are professionals. And they're worried because maybe they can't go into the same career that they were in. But what they forget is even though they got into fraud and whatnot, but a lot of them, they were internally hard workers. And if you have that core, you'll probably be able to spill that into any direction and become successful, because it's not like you were working at Walmart and you had a mindless job, like
No,
you,
no. You have the
what you were
skill.
doing, the scam that you successfully ran, it wasn't based on, it's not like you just walk around and ask people for money. It was based on
No.
a business plan. It was based on a real idea that could have worked. And then, it just didn't work out. And I guess that's where you made the wrong turn. But wouldn't you say it's very similar for people, white collar
So,
in general?
you know, we did in my first year at Federal Prison Tips, we did millions of dollars, and I reinvested that money into starting a nonprofit called 700 Reentry, where we aim to reduce recidivism through entrepreneurship and education, and it's really career resources and entrepreneurship resources specifically for felons. We do co-working and creative space for felons, like for instance here at the 700 Reentry Center, which is, I don't know if you've ever made it this far down to Fort Lauderdale and Dania Beach, but it's the old headquarters to the Hollywood National Bank. And in this building, we have co-working space. We have uh, 11 felon-led startups here. They don't pay rent. They just have an office, and we gel off each other, help each other with web development and business development, and have meetings and that kind of thing. We also teach classes, stuff like that, and we're constantly, we have Coca-Cola was in here having a job fair today, and we have a couple people that work for the Florida Coca-Cola bottler that make six figures, being Coca-Cola reps that have been to federal prison. um, so there ways you can apply that mindset. And I did nearly 7 years all in, between my revocation and my original sentence. I always taught ACE classes. I always taught business and entrepreneurship and all that stuff in federal prison. And one of the things that led to starting 700 is that when you go to federal prison, and you know this for a fact, Dan, you don't, when you meet a drug dealer in prison, even if it's a female drug dealer, if you're a woman drug dealer in federal prison, you didn't just sling your first rock and the DEA locks you up. This is how I say it, when I speak, because I speak a lot in public, and when I taught in prison, I know a lot of millionaire drug dealers. I know that sounds crazy to some people, but most of the drug dealers that I was locked up with, whether it was at Butner or Montgomery or Forest City, were millionaire drug dealers. And in order to be a millionaire drug dealer, you need to know profit and loss, risk mitigation, marketing, product development, sales, all these skills that entrepreneurs and business people in companies across the country spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get degrees in. They learn this stuff on the street. So now they need to turn this street hustle into an actual hustle. And I'm fortunate because I've been able to do it through 700. And then there's another company up north in the northern part of Florida. I'm on a podcast on the northern part of Florida called Ink to Ink that does it in the Tampa Bay area. And in Jacksonville, Florida, Operation New Hope does it. And we're all doing the same thing, which is taking the taking the foundational skills that you have, this criminal mindset, and turning it into a business mindset. So that's the really long-winded answer to your question. Absolutely. If you've been to prison, it's not the end of the road. You're not finished.
You know, it's crazy. And just because what he's speaking is truth, guys. When I was in prison, I was going a lot of classes. A lot of them were inmate ran. A lot of them you didn't get any credit for, but they were kind of skill-based classes. Like they had an Uber class, they had stock classes, real estate classes. And these classes were so incredibly well done. I was so excited when I was getting out of prison. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to keep going to these types of seminars. And when I would go to these types of classes in the free world, they were not nearly as well oiled as some of these inmates that were career criminals. They were career minded, but they were so fucking brilliant as to how they could articulate it. And the reason why it's important is a lot of you that are going into prison, you're going to realize that you have this set of untapped skills that you haven't really even developed yet. In prison, if you use that time wisely, I believe people can get out of prison and not just become a better mindset, a better person, I'm going to be nicer, but you can also be just as financially well off, in many cases, even more so, because you honestly have a new set of honed skills. Nothing but time, pen and paper, your thoughts in your brain, no cell phone, no computer. That stuff really does something to kind of recalibrate who you are. And it sounds like, listening to you talk here is.
I had a lot of that in prison. One of the really cool things is, Kevin Trudeau has a seminar right now that's $10,000, and there's a bunch of people signing up for it. It starts tomorrow. We took the class in prison for free. And it's, I was joking with him on a LinkedIn message. It is the same stuff that he's teaching right now for $10,000. He taught us in prison at the federal prison camp in Montgomery for free. And I personally, in Montgomery, I had the privilege of doing time with Kevin Trudeau and learning those skills. I did time with Greg Lindbergh. He taught classes, learned those stuff from him. Even Jeff Skilling from Enron was in prison with me. And then, there are people that say the same thing about me. You're like, oh my God, you're Kyle from Generation Hustle. Yeah, I am. But I was able to take this hustle and grind that I had then and essentially, because you've watched it and you can, you watched Generation Hustle when it came out, but and some people watched Scam Goddess. I had an incubator, an accelerator, and co-working space, and now we're doing the same thing without the investment model, so I can't get in any trouble. But we've created a collaborative community built around co-working, and we've got 3 feeder halfway houses here, 2 in Miami and 1 in Fort Lauderdale, and they bring people here all the time. We don't even charge the halfway house residents to come and essentially hang out with us and take ACE classes and just continue the education, because I know that you did halfway house time. When I went through prison, I believed wholeheartedly, going through my reentry classes, that there was going to be all these resources when I got to the halfway house, and all I got was a meal, a bus ticket, and a bed. So that's what we're doing here with my 700 reentry, which is my nonprofit. But and we're doing it. Everybody. The funny thing is, I did a tour a couple weeks ago, and when you're on probation, it's like number 8 is you will not knowingly associate with felons. I don't knowingly associate with non-felons now, and I'm surrounded by successful people.
Yeah, that was when I was, because I was on federal probation, 36 months. I terminated after 18, but during the first 18 months, we opened up a call center, and we were hiring a lot of the people out of the halfway house, and trying to explain this to probation. Because the probation could have shut me down if they wanted to, or at least attempted to. But I think there's a difference between associating with felons in a non pro-social way versus in a pro-social environment. I think what you're doing, if it's explained properly, it's probably going to be overwhelmingly encouraged and supported. And if it's not supported, it's because you have somebody that's not really paying attention and checking the boxes. What would you, as we wrap up, because I know you got things to go do and you jumped on your last minute, I appreciate it. But for somebody that's getting out right now, because like you said, the idea of resources on paper, they're there. But the reality is when you get to a halfway house, you're lucky if you get a sheet of paper that says, hey, these places hire, and it's like 4 years old. People that have done serious time, that don't have a lot of social skills, they don't have a strong resume, they've never really held a real job. These people recidivate pretty quickly because the system is not really designed to, here's a bus ticket, get to here, and you get from point A to point B, and they tell you you're at the wrong place. There's not enough communication throughout the entire group. So it sounds like you're socially creating a hub that kind of directs people, because people still, let's be real, you've got people that come there, you can provide all of the tools, but they still got to put in the work, right? And develop these skills over time. You're just giving them a platform where it's designed to flourish and not fail if they're willing to put in the work.
Right. And honestly, Dan, to tell you the truth, that's the proposition that we do for our donors. When you Federal Prison Tips is a for-profit business. We do make a lot of money, and I turn a lot of that money and throw it right back into 700 Reentry. 700 Reentry is a nonprofit, and the proposition to our donors is that unlike some charities and some nonprofits, the people that we're helping, they want to be helped. They take that first step to come here. It's more than just put your name on a thing. They physically come here, and they have to be engaged, and then from there, they actually get resources. And resources is more than just saying, here's resources. Like today, for instance, we had a group from Coca-Cola, a couple people from Coca-Cola come. We had a Coca-Cola job fair. We did a thing where people that wanted to work for Coke came and saw the Coca-Cola lady. We're doing the same thing in 2 weeks for Procter and Gamble. And it's not like go there, it's come here, and everybody's going to come and then it's up to the person reentering society to go to make the next step after that. But they know that they can come here to get that start, to get that resume, we even have something called Kyle's Closet, where we're taking donations of business attire and work clothes from people here in the community. And this community. I mean, we're in Dania Beach, which is on the south side of Fort Lauderdale. So I've got, people from Fort Lauderdale, Dania Beach, Delray, Boca donating their business clothes. So we have, Kenneth Cole, Louis Vuitton, all this shit in our Kyle's Closet that you can wear to your job interview absolutely free. We're not even doing like thrift store shit. We're doing, sorry for cussing. We're not doing a thrift store thing. They're donating it, and hey, dude has a job interview next week. Come on down and get an outfit. Oh, you need to start. You need 3 outfits next week for your job. There you go. And it's more, so we're making it so easy. All you gotta do is have just a little bit of effort to want to do better, and we're gonna help you the best that we can.
Very cool. Well, Kyle, I appreciate you taking a few minutes, jumping on here last minute.
I appreciate you, man.
So in 2 weeks you'll be up here. Well, hopefully you'll come through. And
well, we're gonna make it happen. I'm over here talking to you and checking out the airfares and all this kind of stuff back from Utah to listen, man. Dan,
Utah, you're gonna fly into Spokane International Airport, which is Washington, but it's like 45 minutes from here. I'll send you the info.
It's just like, that's what I'm saying. Once we get out to Utah, it's a lot cheaper to go to
a little puddle
Spokane
jump
than it would be from here.
Yep.
So we'll definitely set something up. I'm looking forward to it.
So Kyle will be in the studio. We'll sit down. We'll have maybe we'll do we'll make a day of it and do 2 or 3 interviews. And we'll have some stuff to post. But I'm super excited. I can't, I know about your story, but it's been years. So we're really going to kind of, I'm sure you've told it a million times. So we're going to get to hear all of the. It's just when I watched that episode, I was like, this piece of shit, but that's because look, these episodes are designed to create that. But that's the cool thing, is seeing where somebody was and making that turn. and then watching the growth that comes behind that. And I always tell people, look, just be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. And eventually you'll become the person you want to be before you don't even know who that was. So, you know, I only known you for a few minutes, but I'm proud of what you've accomplished, what you're doing for people going through it. And it's great for the community to have something to fall back on. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you, brother.
Guys, Adam Sandler, Kyle Sandler. I have to always just remind myself because I'm kind of, you know, slow that way. But Kyle Sandler, guys, go check out Federal Prison Tips on Facebook. Go check him out on TikTok. And if you're getting ready to go to federal prison, you're looking for somebody to guide you, Kyle can definitely help you out. There's a link in this video description to book a free consultation with me. It's free, 15 minutes. We go over kind of some necessary steps, find out where you are in your case. Maybe you need help, maybe you don't. But the worst thing that you can do is walk through this blind and try to figure it out once you get there in prison. So that 15-minute call could be the best thing that you've ever did. All right, guys, I'm Dan Wise, RDAP Dan, Federal Prison Time Consulting, People Up People, Communities Method, one day at a time. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks with Kyle Sanders.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.